The morning Clara Belle stepped down from the stagecoach in Laramie County. The richest rancher in Wyoming was burying his dead wife's piano behind the house, not because it was broken, but because every note had become a ghost. His daughter Rose stood beside him with a cracked doll in her arms. Silent as a grave bell, Clara had come to Silverthorne Ranch for wages, shelter, and distance from a past that still hunted her. Yet when Gideon Vale looked up from the pit and saw her plain brown shoes in the dust, she knew at once the advertisement had lied. This man did not only need a governess, he needed someone brave enough to enter a house where grief had learned to breathe. Nobody in town believed Clara would last a week. She wore a faded traveling dress, gloves mended twice, and shoes so plain they invited laughter. While Gideon Vale owned 30,000 acres, 200 horses, and a mansion large enough to make loneliness sound rich, his foreman, Jeb Crowley, met her at the station with a smirk. "You, the schoolwoman," he asked. "I am the governess Mr. Vale hired," Clara said. Lifting her own carpet bag, Jeb spat into the dirt. "Little Rose has run off 3 before you." "And Mr. Vale runs off anyone who asks too much." Clara said nothing, but before the ranch gate opened, she saw fresh rifle marks in the posts, and Jeb saw her notice. Silverthorne rose from the prairie like a king's regret. White walls, iron gates, red roofs, wide verandas, and land stretching so far it seemed to swallow the sky. Clara expected noise, servants, money moving confidently through rooms, but the house was silent, the kind of silence that does not rest. Gideon met her on the steps, tall, broad-shouldered, black hat low over storm-colored eyes. He looked first at her shoes, then at her face, and said, "My daughter needs lessons, not pity." Clara held his gaze. "Children need truth before lessons, Mr. Vale." The air tightened. Because no one corrected the millionaire rancher of Silverthorne, especially not a woman in plain shoes. Rose Vale was 7 years old, pale, watchful, and silent enough to frighten adults. Clara found her beneath a covered mirror. Lining wooden horses toward the window, one small horse stood apart from the rest. Almost at the rug's edge, Clara knelt without crowding her. "That one looks lonely," she said. Rose's fingers paused. "He is not lonely," the child whispered, so softly Clara nearly missed it. "He is waiting." Clara felt the room grow cold, for whom Rose looked to the window, where a rider in a gray coat had appeared on the hill beyond the yard, then vanished, as if the prairie had swallowed him whole. That was the first warning, and Clara was the only one willing to see it by supper. Clara understood the ranch did not run on wealth, it ran on fear. Servants lowered their voices when Gideon entered. Hands stopped laughing when Jeb passed, and no one spoke the dead wife's name. Gideon sat at the head of the table with a dented silver locket beside his plate. Rose pushed beans around silently. Clara said Rose should study reading, some scripture, manners, and piano. Gideon's fork struck the plate. "No piano." Rose dropped her spoon. Clara kept her voice gentle. "Music may help her speak." Gideon stood so quickly his chair scraped like a warning shot. "Music killed enough in this house," he said. That night, beneath Clara's room, one hidden piano note sounded. The gunfire came on a blue afternoon while Clara was teaching Rose the alphabet. One shot cracked beyond the barn, then another. Rose slid beneath the desk without crying, trained by terror. Clara dropped beside her until the shouting stopped, then ran into the yard. A young ranch hand lay bleeding near the trough, and a black feather was pinned to his vest with a knife. Jeb tore it free too quickly. But Clara saw the mark burned into the stem, a crooked crown. Gideon ordered everyone back to work as if blood and the dust were ordinary. But when he looked at Clara, anger failed him for 1 second. And she saw a panic underneath. The attack had not surprised him, and that frightened her more than the gunshots. That evening, she found Gideon in the stable. Washing blood from his hands, though, the wounded hand still lived. Lantern light cut his face into gold and shadow, making him look less like a cattle king and more like a prisoner. "Who sent the feather?" Clara asked. "You were hired to teach my daughter," he said, "and if danger comes through her window, must I conjugate verbs while it takes her?" He threw the cloth into a bucket. "You do not know what men will do for land." Clara stepped closer. I know what men will do when they think a woman has no witness. His eyes snapped to hers. And for a breath, both their secrets stood between them like loaded guns. Then Rose appeared at the stable door, holding Gideon's dented locket open in her small hand. Inside was no portrait, but a tiny folded map. Marked with a red cross, north of Silverthorn. Gideon snatched it away. Too late. "Your wife found something," Clara said. His face hardened. "My wife is dead." "That is not an answer," Rose whispered. "Mama said the Black Crown men wanted the spring." Gideon closed his eyes. And suddenly the richest rancher in Wyoming looked like a man who had spent years losing the same woman every morning. Evelyn Vale had discovered a water source that could make or ruin every ranch for 50 miles. And someone had silenced her before she could speak. After that night, Gideon tried to dismiss Clara. Not cruelly, but with money. He placed 3 months' wages on his desk and told her the stagecoach left at dawn. Clara looked at the bills, then at Rose, sleeping nearby with one hand curled around her sleeve. "You think wealth makes leaving easy?" she said. "It only makes cowardice expensive." Gideon's voice cracked through his anger. "I buried my wife because I thought quiet would protect this house. I will not bury another woman for being brave." Clara stepped closer. "Then stop asking brave women to disappear for the first time." Gideon looked not at her shoes, not at her faded dress, but at her, as if honesty had finally entered his house and refused to leave. At the harvest dance, Clara felt eyes on her before the first fiddle note ended. Women whispered over her dress, men bowed too politely to Gideon, and Jeb stood near the livery with 3 strangers in gray coats. During a reel, Rose laughed aloud for the first time in public, clear and bright, and Gideon nearly missed his step from the shock of joy. Clara smiled before she could stop herself. Gideon saw it. And for one brief moment, they forgot the dead, the threats, and the watching men. Then a stranger brushed Clara's shoulder and slipped a folded note into her glove. Beneath the lantern light, she opened it and read 6 words that drained the music from the night. "The governess knows Evelyn's secret." Clara tried to warn Gideon, but the church bell rang once. Wrong for the hour, and flames rose beyond town. Silverthorn's north pasture was burning. Men ran for horses, women screamed, and Gideon seized Clara's arm. "Take Rose home by the south road," he ordered. Clara shook her head. "That is what they want. Do as I say." "No," she said. And the word landed harder than a gunshot. Rose cried, "Papa!" The piano room. Clara understood before he did. Evelyn had hidden the truth where grief had made Gideon forbid anyone to look. So while men fought fire miles away, Clara took a lamp, Rose took her hand. And together they went beneath the house. The buried music room smelled of dust. Old roses and secrets. The piano sat under a sheet. The dead woman's shawl still draped across a chair as if she had only stepped away. Rose pressed 3 keys in the order her mother had taught her. Low, high, low, and a panel opened beneath the bench. Inside lay deeds, survey notes, and a letter naming Jeb Crowley and the Black Crown Company as thieves and murderers. Clara had just lifted the letter when a pistol clicked behind her. Jeb stood in the doorway with gray-coated men at his back. "Smiling, plain shoes, walk quiet," he said. But not quiet enough. Rose clung to Clara's waist. And Clara knew money could not buy them one more second. Jeb ordered Clara to hand over the papers. She held them to her chest and said, "A dead woman wrote the truth. And truth has a stubborn habit of outliving cowards." He raised the pistol. Rose sobbed, and Gideon's voice came from the dark hall. "Calm as winter. Point that gun at my daughter again. In hell we'll have to make room." He stepped into the lamplight with a rifle. And beside him stood the wounded ranch hand. Alive and ready to testify, Jeb fired. The lamp shattered. Darkness burst across the room. Clara pulled Rose down. Men crashed into furniture. Gideon lunged, and when light returned, Jeb lay pinned beneath his boot. While Evelyn's letter remained safe in Clara's hands, spring came soft to Silverthorn. Green along the creek banks, gold over the hills. Music pouring through open windows, Gideon rebuilt the piano room above ground. With sunlight on the keys and Evelyn's portrait beside it, Clara meant to leave when her contract ended. Because leaving had kept her alive before. But Rose cried for 3 nights, and Gideon stopped meeting her eyes at breakfast. On her final morning, Clara came downstairs in her traveling dress and plain brown shoes, carrying the same carpet bag she had brought months earlier. Gideon waited by the door, hat in hand, more frightened than he had looked under gunfire. "I can pay you more," he said. Clara's smile trembled. "I was never here for the money, then. Tell me what would make you stay," Gideon asked. For a moment Clara heard the old road calling, the stagecoach, the habit of leaving before anyone could leave her. Then Rose appeared on the stairs with the mended doll, and Gideon stepped closer. "I did not expect to love again," he said. "I surely did not expect to fall for the woman who came to my door in plain shoes and taught my house how to breathe." Clara looked down at those shoes. "Scuffed, stained, faithful, they are not fine enough for a millionaire's wife," she whispered. Gideon knelt before her, not as a cattle king, but as a man asking mercy. "Clara Belle, those shoes brought my daughter back. I would be honored if they walked beside me for the rest of my life." They married beneath the cottonwood, where Clara had buried the sparrow. Rose scattered wildflowers, the ranch hands cheered, and the piano played from the open parlor while Silverthorn rang with joy no one dared bury again. Some said Gideon Vale had saved his ranch. Others said Clara Belle had saved his daughter, but the truth was quieter and stronger. She saved the parts of him wealth could not touch, and he gave her a home that did not ask her to run years later, when visitors admired the fields fed by Evelyn's spring. Gideon pointed not to the land, nor the horses, nor the silver, but to the plain brown shoes kept near the piano, and he said, "That is where our real fortune began."